I just wish there was dragons around, man.
Honestly, yeah, dude. It
would probably be very, very bad because people would be getting charbroiled.
It's like Pokemon. I'm like, man, this would be so cool to live in this world. I'm like, it probably wouldn't get attacked all the time, but you know.
I still want to live in, I want to live in a fantasy world, at least through board games.
What's up, everybody? My name is Nick.
I'm Mike.
We are the Brothers Murph, and that's right. Today we're talking about our favorite fantasy-based games.
Yes.
Fantasy is kind of a broad concept. We're sticking to fantasy, not fantasy and sci-fi, because again, sci-fi is again a whole other thing.
Sure.
But there's tons of games set in all different kinds of fantasy worlds.
Absolutely. So these are going to be games that just have a really kind of fun fantasy setting, and of course we enjoy the games themselves,
Naturally.
and not just the setting. But it's just a really rich, I think, area to pull from. Fantasy is something that obviously has endured forever, and all the stories we tell and legends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some board games that do it real good. Number 10 is going to be Root. This is a war-style game where you are different animal factions all vying for control over the forest. Each faction is going to be very different from each other. They're going to operate in different ways, and they're going to have different ways to produce points, and you kind of a race to 30 points. In the base game, you have like the Marquita Cat, who's like the de facto current ruler of the forest. They're going to start off with a bunch of industry kind of in place already. They're the fat cats have been running things to this point, and you might be the Woodland Alliance or the Vagabond or the Erie Dynasty, which are all going to be trying to generate points and sort of take over different areas, different clearings in the forest, craft cards and do stuff like that. This is one that I just like really enjoy the world of. Like the kind of warring animals makes the the war style game to me a little more approachable, a little more fun to play versus having it be a real life conflict that actually happened. And just the, now with the various expansions they've made, there's a ton of different factions and just so much creativity going in this game. This is a game you can just sort of play forever.
Our number 9 is going to be Dungeon Petz. This was the first like thematic Euro game that I had ever seen. We got in the hobby a little over 10 years ago. This was a newer game, and gosh, I really love Dungeon Petz. It's set in this weird little fantasy world in the Dungeon Lords world where there's like imps and just different magical creatures. And in this case, you are a magical pet shop owner, and you run a little pet shop, and there are going to be dungeon lords that are coming through town, and they're going to want specific kinds of pets. They might want really aggressive pets. They want pets that play a lot, pets that eat a lot, pets that poop a lot. That's a thing. And so you're trying to raise these various monsters to sell off to these dungeon lords who are coming through town looking for a cute little pet. And again, a lot of times these pets aren't all that cute, but that's kind of the fun of the game. And it's a worker placement game where you're kind of sending out your family members into the town. You're getting new pets. You're getting new like enclosures to put them in. You're getting food for them. You're trying to like rig contests and stuff. It's one of those like Vlaada Chvátil games that's very, very like silly and has a very fun, silly, light theme, but it's ultimately a pretty heavy game. I really, really love this kind of weird little universe that it's in. I love Dungeon Petz. Again, it was one of the first like really thematic Euro games that I had ever seen. And I fell in love with it, still love it. It's a great fantasy setting.
Next one is going to be Clank. This is my first ever number 1 game. The first time I ever did a ranking to see what's my favorite game of all time, Clank was it. I still really love this deck building game. This is a game where you're going to be going down into a dungeon, getting different treasures and stuff and stealing things, but there's a dragon that is the one whose hoard you are stealing from, and they don't really like that you're stealing from them. As you're playing cards, a lot of them are going to produce clank. It's you making a bunch of noise, basically drawing attention to yourself. And they're going to be represented with these cubes that go into a bag, and there's going to be various events that are going to cause cubes to come back out of the bag, which are, you know, representing the dragon attacking. And if your color comes out, that's you getting damaged. So you can actually get knocked out completely, and you won't be able to count your treasure if you're still underground. If you make it above ground and then get knocked out, you do get to at least count your treasure. But if you get all the way down into the dungeon, get a bunch of loot, and then fully escape, you get bonus points that way. This is just a really fun one. The kind of sense of humor of this game is really spot on for me. You know, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's kind of silly. The art and the types of cards you can get are really fun. You can chain together really cool combinations, so it's a really kind of solid, kind of classic feeling deck builder, but you have this big board that you're navigating so that you have the kind of the blend of the two, of like the pure deck building along with like a board that you are then using your cards to kind of go around and manipulate.
Number 7 is a game I feel like I personally evangelize a lot, and that is Mythic Mischief. I love Mythic Mischief. I find any excuse to talk about it, which is why it shows up on a lot of different lists, because I really, really love Mythic Mischief. This is a game set in a fantasy high school where you are a bunch of different cliques around the high school. You're like the vampires, or you're like the werewolves, or you're like the trolls and stuff, and they all kind of have the things. So like the werewolves are like the rockers, like they have like a band. The trolls are like the debate team and stuff like that. There's like the skaters, which are like zombies, and there's all these different factions, and they all play differently. And it's a 2-player, for the most part, abstract strategy game where there is a tome keeper in the middle. It's kind of like the big librarian. And that tome keeper is on kind of a set path to these various spots around the board. But on your turn, you can move your little mythics around. You have a group of 3. But you can also, every mythic has a different way where they can essentially move other mythics, whether it's their own or someone else's, and they can also move the shelves, the shelves of books that are in the library. You can move them around the board, and what that's going to do a lot of times is block off this tome keeper and make them go to different routes. And what you're trying to do is move your enemy mythics into a space where the tome keeper will land on them. The tome keeper lands on their space. They then go to detention. I like to think personally that he eats these children, but they keep telling me that I'm wrong about that. But nonetheless, they get sent to detention. They get taken off the board, and you get a point. You're trying to get to 10 points first. I really love this weird little like high school fantasy setting. I think it's really, really fun the way they do all the different art, the way they do all the different factions. And like I said, the factions are only different really in the way that they move other mythics and the way that they can move the bookshelves. That's pretty much it. That's the only difference. But even those slight little changes really change up how you have to play the game. And I adore this game. I actually probably prefer it solo more than anything else because I really like to just dive into that faction, figure out how they work, and kind of play them over and over and over again. I love Mythic Mischief. I seem to never get tired of it, and I'm never going to stop talking about it.
All right, next up is going to be Wonderland's War. The world of Alice in Wonderland, of course, is very rich and interesting, and Manny Tremblay did the art for Wonderland's War and just created a very fun kind of iteration of the Alice in Wonderland world, which is currently at war. All these factions, the Mad Hatter, Alice, the Cheshire Cat and stuff, they're all battling it out over the different kind of regions of Wonderland and going a little bit crazy as they do. So this game is going to be played over 3 rounds where you're going to have kind of 2 halves of the round. You're going to have the Tea Party phase, which is going to be comprised of you going around this kind of rondel collecting cards, which might give you supporters, might give you new chips because it's a bag building game ultimately, and be able to put people out into the different regions of the board. And then once you've kind of collected your cards for the round, you are then going to go into the kind of area control battling phase where you're going to go over the various regions of Wonderland. Any players who have presence in that area are going to start pulling chips from their bag to provide strength to that battle, hoping to win out, to be able to put your castles down and score points and stuff at the end of the round. And then you're going to do that a couple more times. So it's just really interesting the way you can kind of build up and make use of these chips, because the various chips you pull out are going to be other kind of Wonderlandian characters and things. They're going to have different abilities, kind of like Quaxaquidlinburg has, where when you pull this chip, it's going to do this kind of thing. And similar to Quaxaquidlinburg, from game to game, what the types of chips do can change. There are also Wonderlandians you can recruit, which might give you chips to go in your bag or characters to go out into the regions of the board that are going to affect things further. And this is just one where this is a big, splashy production, very high level. The art is super duper cool, and it just is kind of like my favorite version of the Alice in Wonderland kind of extended universe.
Number 5 is a game that took me a little bit to get into. The first couple times I played it, I actually didn't like it that much, and this is Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones and a lot of chip theory games are lifestyle games for the most part. The people who love chip theory games tend to really, really play them over and over and over and really explore them fully. And if you're willing to do that, chip theory games, in my opinion, are incredible. But if you're only gonna play them once, they're kind of sometimes can be a little tough because of the fact that they tend to be so big and so deep. Too Many Bones is a game where you're taking a gear lock, which is the kind of, in this fantasy world, the kind of people that you're playing, and all those gear locks are going to be very, very different. They're all going to have completely unique dice, all these different abilities that they can do, totally different ways that they play, and then you're going to be going up against a tyrant, and that tyrant is going to be essentially a mission down the road, and you're kind of going to be creating like an encounter deck, and you're going through those encounters, eventually getting to the tyrant, and then if you can beat the tyrant, that's how you win the game. But the game itself is not actually that complicated. The characters can get kind of complicated, but like what you're doing in the game actually isn't. You have a very simple little board. Each encounter almost always is going to be some kind of fight, and then you're fighting. Each encounter will tell you kind of how that fight works. They change it up a lot, but it's always pretty simple the way it works. And then if you win those fights of that, you'll get progress points, which you can use to up your stats and, of course, get more dice. I really, really like Too Many Bones. I like this kind of like the gear lock. This whole universe, I think, is very, very fun. Very, very cool. And I really like the way the gear locks all play very, very differently. Again, from one to the other, you're basically playing a completely different game. It's really, really fascinating. If you're willing to put in the time to learning those gear locks, man, oh man, do you got a lot of gameplay ahead of you.
Next up is going to be Gloomhaven. This is the former #1 game of all time right here on Board Game Geek, and this is a huge world that was created just for this game, where you are mercenaries going around taking on quests, essentially, kind of getting to the bottom of this kind of grand story that's going to take you through different scenarios. There's different points where the storyline can kind of branch and go one way or another, and you are inhabiting these characters as they are kind of, working their mission, and could get to a point where they kind of complete their, their life's work or whatever, their kind of their main mission in life, and at which point they'll retire and you have to take on a new character. As you go through the game, you're going to interact with and then unlock other types of characters to play, which have their own kind of deck of cards, their own flavor, ability, and kind of style. And I just really enjoyed that this is a really kind of lived-in world that feels very expansive now, especially with Frosthaven coming out, which is even bigger than Gloomhaven and set in the same world as Gloomhaven. It's just this kind of ever-growing kind of sandbox within which we can play.
Number 3 is going to be Slay the Spire, the board game. Also love the video game, have put in hundreds of hours into the video game, and have put in a whole bunch of hours into the board game as well, because I really, really like the board game. And I do enjoy this kind of the fantasy setting that it's in, where there's a big old spire, and you're basically trying to get to the top of the spire to slay the Act 3 boss. The game is broken down into 3 different acts. At the end of every act, there's going to be a boss, and they get kind of harder and harder. And it's a roguelike game where when you go, but if you ever die and you lose, you have to go back to the beginning. All the cards you got all go away. You're starting back at your base deck, and you have to go again. In this game, you are taking on a character. There's like the Ironclad, the Silent, the Watcher, and the Defect. Every single one of these characters has a completely unique deck, and they really play very differently. They just have things that they do. The Ironclad is all about strength and a lot of times discarding cards. You're getting a whole bunch of strength and then hitting like an absolute truck. The Silent is about like poisoning their enemies and like using all these little shiv cards and like these little shiv tokens to kind of pot shot their enemies. The Watcher is moving between stances between like wrathful and peaceful. And the Defect is like kind of this big orby robot automaton kind of thing, and they're like channeling all these different orbs. It's crazy. They all play very differently, and in this one you're playing cooperatively, and so as you're going through the Spire, you're working together to defeat enemies and move from encounter to encounter until you get to the boss, and then you move on to the next act, and hopefully you can get through all of Act 3, and if you win, that's how you win. I really love Slay the Spire. I've played the video game for hundreds of hours. We played the board game a whole bunch too. I just never seem to get tired of it. I'm always discovering new synergies. I'm always discovering new ways to play the game, new ways to play the characters. I just think it's so much fun. I love it.
If you know us, you know that we love Lord of the Rings, and so it's no surprise that the next one is War of the Ring. It's Lord of the Rings in a box, so, you know, it's our favorite kind of fantasy world anyway. So, of course, this has to be on the list. This is a big old, you know, good versus evil war-style game where you are going to be playing out cards, rolling dice to be able to take actions, as you kind of amass your troops, go and protect strongholds and stuff, or if you are the shadow armies and stuff, of course, you want to take over all of Middle-earth. If you're the free people, you want to destroy the One Ring, or, you know, win out in kind of 4 military victories, which of course is going to be very difficult because you are vastly outnumbered on the military side of things as the free peoples. This is just a game that for us has a lot of satisfying stuff to it. The card play is multi-use. There are kind of 2 uses for cards. One will be used if it's being used in a battle. Another one will have a different kind of effect. They are all specific things that are tied to moments from the books. And so there's just a lot of kind of like flavor and really satisfying moments from that card play. And then of course we're telling a familiar tale. We all know the story of the Lord of the Rings and how it all kind of plays out. We have the big map of Middle-earth, and things might go kind of similarly to how they go in the books, or things can wildly depart. And I think that's really exciting to have such a familiar world, but then be able to be surprised by the events that kind of, you know, unfold as you play. And that's just really thrilling.
Number 1 is going to be Spirit Island. Spirit Island is kind of interesting because it is set pseudo in the real world where you are spirits on an island and there are invaders, kind of like colonists coming to your island. And there's a lot of games about that, but usually you're the colonists. In this game, it's the other side of that coin. Something that I wish more and more games would do is kind of showing a game, but from the other perspective, from the other side of the coin. And in this case, you are the spirits and you are trying to get people off of your island, and you're trying to get them away from the Dahan, who are the kind of native people to that island, who are your friends, who are your allies, and you're trying to protect them while repelling all of these colonists. It's a really, really cool concept. And again, it's kind of set in the real world in the sense where this is like a thing that happens, right? And so, but again, it's a fantasy game because you're playing as spirits, and all of these spirits play very, very differently. They're all very asymmetric. Some of them are really, really fast and kind of hit hard. Some are slow, and that is a distinct thing, fast and slow, because fast things will happen before the enemies go, slow things will happen afterwards. And so those are legit terms in the game, not just like quick and slow. And so it's really, really fun. This is a game where you can take a specific spirit and just play them again, play them again, play them again, play the game, and really learn how to play them well, really learn how they tick, how they work. And then once you feel like, okay, I feel like I've done this one a lot, move on to the next one. There's a whole bunch of content for this. Even in the base game, there's a bunch of content, but there's a whole bunch of expansions, a whole bunch of new spirits and stuff. This is a game that they've really, really supported, and it's widely considered a masterpiece, one of the best games ever made, and I agree. I think it's great, but it is set in that kind of like real world, but also fantasy setting. And again, it's that kind of that other side of the coin, which I think is a really, really cool concept that I wish more publishers did with their board games, because it'd just be cool to see the other perspective from stuff. You know, it's about the moon landing. What about the moon? You know, it's like, hey man, get out of here. That's how I decided to end that entry. So those are our top 10 fantasy-based board games. Let us know down in the comments below what fantasy games you enjoy, what kind of fantasy settings you enjoy, because again, there's whole new ones, really unique ones, kind of the classic medieval, like Tolkien-y kind of fantasy settings. There's a whole bunch of them, so let us know your favorite down in the comments below.
Absolutely,
That's
and
gonna
that's going to be it, everyone. We'll see you on the next top 10.
Bye.